The long splice. This is similar, it has the same idea as a short splice in that we're taking two lengths of rope and we're going to turn it into one piece of rope. It's different from the short splice in that the finished product will have a diameter very near the same as the original diameter of the rope. Whereas a short splice, actually we've got an example of a short splice that we'd done earlier. You'll see the finished product has a diameter that's approximately twice that of the original rope. So while this is a stronger splice, trying to get this to go through a block or a pulley that is designed for the original diameter is going to be very difficult. So in that case, it makes sense to do this with a long splice. And essentially, we're going to start off in a similar way in that we'll marry these two ends together. It's called crotching them. We'll crotch these ropes together, and then we'll begin the splice. So with the long splice, the rule of thumb is you want to have the ends of the splice have a 15-inch length for every 1-inch diameter of rope. And I always round up on the recommendation. So the recommendation is 15:1 ratio. We've got 3/8 inch rope, which is a little bit smaller than 1/2 inch, so we'll round this up and just call it 1/2 inch, and it makes the calculation easier. 1/2 inch rope would require half of the 15 inches, which is 7. So we'd want at least 7 inches here. And I generally, just for safety's sake, and since the rope is rather cheap, compared to what it's protecting, we'll round that up. So we'll probably look at roughly 10 inches of leg length here on both sides. So we'll just unlay the rope until we have roughly 10 inches. I'm not going to take a measuring tape to this because it's not actually going to be lifting anything with it. This is just for the purposes of the video. So we're getting probably close to about 10 inches. I'll go just a wee bit more. Leave yourself a little bit extra because at the end of the splice you're going to want to have enough left to do 3 tucks, and I'll explain that in a minute. So let's say we're close to about the length that we want here. We'll unlay this side to a similar length. Needs a little more, yep. And just take your time as you're doing this, because you want to have these strands still maintaining their twist as much as possible. It'll make life easier for you once you get going. Okay, so that's probably close enough. So the next step is to crotch these ropes, to essentially marry them together. It kind of looks a little bit fiddly and messy when you're doing it, but hopefully we'll get this right on our first try. If not, it's no big deal. Just back off and try it again. So essentially what you're going to wind up with is one strand in between its neighbor's strands. So they're kind of laying inside each other. And I think we've just about got it. Now I mentioned that this splice is not as strong as a short splice, and the reason for that is the way the splice is done. With a short splice, each piece goes over its neighbor, and you essentially have 3 strands from this piece getting spliced in here, and 3 strands from this piece getting spliced down in here. So the rope really does not lose any strength. With the long splice, what we're going to be doing is unraveling or unlaying one side. So we're going to take one strand and unlay it and lay its neighbor back into the void that this strand leaves as it vacates. And so what you're going to wind up with is at any point in the rope you'll have two original strands from the original piece of rope, and then one strand having been spliced in from its partner. So it's generally considered to be about 2/3 of the strength, counting the strength of the two original strands, and not really counting the strength of the partner rope that's been laid in. And we'll show you. You'll see how it works momentarily. So now that we've got these crotched, what I want to do is work them up fairly tightly, and it's the center part of the splice that will tell you if you have a good quality splice or not. What we want in the final product is for the entire length to look as though it's one contiguous piece of rope, and not have any large gaps or any strands that are twisted over or twisted funny or that don't lay properly. If you find that you have any of those symptoms, it's best to just unravel everything and start again. And it's generally in the middle that any problems crop up. That's where you'll see them. And we'll tell you if the center looks good, generally the rest of the splice will be good. What I'm going to do, just so that things stay together while I'm working on them, is I'm just going to take a piece of small stuff and just temporarily seize the center part of the splice so that we don't get any gaps or anything funny happening. What I'm going to be doing is taking, we'll probably start with these ones here. I'll unlay this one to the right and lay this one in its place. And since we're going to be working this way, what I'll do is move them to the side so that they're free to run, while I just temporarily seize down the rest of the splice so that it doesn't move while I'm working on it. And I'm just going to use a slipped surgeon's knot. Basically, it's a reef knot with an extra tuck, and I'll just slip it so that it's easy for me to undo. So this really is just a temporary thing while I'm working in the one direction. So we've got our center there and our seizing on, and what I'm going to do is start to, let's move this out of the way a little bit, I'm going to start to unlay one of these strands, and you'll see that it leaves a void as it comes out, and as that unlays, its neighbor here will lay back in its place and fill the void that it just left. And it's important here to continue to twist this rope so that it lays nicely and maintains its shape as you remove the one strand. So what I'm going to do is work this sort of about half the length of the finished product, and then we'll sort of temporarily tie it off while we continue on the rest of the splice. And the reason is, once we do these sort of halfway along, we'll go back and look at our tension on the strands, and if any adjustments are necessary, it's easy to make them if you've only sort of laid in half the number of turns as opposed to having to go through the full length. So we've got a number in there, and I think that's good enough. I'm just going to just temporarily tie this off with a half overhand knot, and that'll be good enough for it to stay put while we do our centerpiece and then the next side. So from here I'll undo this temporary season, and now we're going to work on the center portion of this splice. So it'll be these two strands here, and the center portion doesn't really go anywhere. So the right side kind of works down the left side, which we'll do in a moment, will work down the left side, and the center portion really just kind of stays put. And we'll just we'll give it sort of a half of a knot here, and sort of pull it tight, not too tight, we just want it to lay happily, and then we'll start on the left side. So now that we've got that in, we'll just leave it there for a moment, and we'll come back to it in a minute to make sure that the tensions are nice. Now we'll start on the left side, working down. So it's the same thing as the right, in that we're going to unlay one side, and in the void that it creates, we'll lay the next one along, right in its path, or right in its place. Once again, giving the strand a nice twist as you go, so that it maintains its shape and fills in the space fully. So once again, we'll just go about halfway down, and then we'll inspect our work and see if any adjustments need to be made. So we'll give it one more, and then take a look at things and see where we are. So maintaining the twist. And we'll just we'll give it a temporary overhand knot here. And we'll go back and take a look at things. So what we're hoping to see is at the center portion here, we have no gaps or voids or any strands crossed over, and we're looking pretty good here. And we want to have both sides kind of looking the same, with nothing, no strands sticking out or doing anything funny. And I think we're actually looking pretty good. So it should look almost like one continuous piece of rope the whole way down. Once you're happy that you've got that, then continue to finish off all the way down the one side, all the way down the other, and then we'll put the tucks in that we need. And I'll show you that momentarily. So I'll go back to the right hand side, and we'll just finish I guess, unlaying and unlaying the one side and laying the other in its place. But the longer we make these tails, the more strength this is ultimately going to have, or the more we can rely on it later. Okay, so that's good enough. We'll finish this side off here. So once again, finishing with basically just an overhand knot. So you can see that this is almost the same diameter as the original knot. So this here, as the original rope. This here being the original piece, and this is the splice piece. You can see how this would fit through a block or a pulley much more easily than this short splice would. Okay. So we'll show you how to finish this off, and we'll do the same finishing procedure for all three of these spots here. Essentially, what we're going to do is make 2 full tucks with each strand. So one going in this direction, one going in this one. Once we've done 2 tucks, we'll remove half the material from the strand, and then make a 3rd tuck. Essentially, the idea is to taper this joint. So I guess I'll start with this one, going in this direction, and you're doing this just like in the other sort of more standard types of splicing that we did, that you're going over top of its neighbor and underneath and back up. So we'll do that twice. Then we'll remove some of the material, half the material from the strand, and then we'll do a 3rd one. Now, with the long splice, this may be slightly different than some of the regular splicing that you've done, and that once we get to this point, the idea is to make this rope lay as flat as possible, so that we don't have a whole lot of extra diameter given to this rope. So it's so rather than maintain the twist at this point like we've been doing with almost all the other splicing, it's actually okay, and not even just okay, it's actually preferable for this to come through flat, to spread out and not have the twist, so that it lays as flat and with as small a diameter as possible. So we'll lay 2 in like that. So just spreading it out a little bit. And we'll take the old knife here. And I believe we've got 7 strands here. So I'll leave 4 in, and I'll remove 3 of them. So I don't trim it off immediately right here. Give it a little bit of extra so that we can melt them down and finish this securely later. So that was 2 strands with two tucks with the full diameter. Then we'll do 1 tuck with a half diameter. Okay, so that's one side of this one done. We'll do the same thing with this one going in this direction. This is rather a long leg to work with, but that's okay. So same thing, 2 tucks with a full strand, and then 1 tuck with with half the material being removed. And once again, we want this to lay flat so as not to make the rope any thicker than it needs to be. So there's 1. There's 2. And we'll remove half the material. So I was leaving 4 strands in. So I'll remove 3. We'll leave it a little bit long. I can trim and melt that later. Okay. So the third one with half the material. And that essentially is one side complete. Of course, we'll trim and melt this, and we'll show you the finished product at the end. So the center is essentially done in the form that it is now. We just need to put those tucks in. It's exactly the same thing. 2 tucks and then a third one with half the material in each direction. And this side here, I still have to finish unlaying and relaying the line. So we'll do that until we get to the end, or approximately to the point where we can have just enough to do our tucks. So here we're trying to maintain the twist in the line. It's only with the tucks that you want things to be flat. Okay. So we'll finish with an overhand knot. Okay, and then we'll do our tucks. So we'll start with the little guy, and we'll go 2 full. letting the strand sort of unwind itself a bit and lay flat here. So there's one. There's two. And then we'll remove half the material. So in this case we'll be knocking 3 strands out of it. And we do our third tuck with a half, with the remaining half strand. And then we can trim that as well. And once again, leave yourself a little bit of extra. We can trim and melt when we're completely done. So that's one side of it. And we'll do the same thing going in the other direction. So there's the left side done. And then we just simply do the same exact thing with the center portion. And final tuck here. So there's number 3. And you do the same routine, giving it a roll underfoot or between your hands, and once you're happy, basically just trim these down, give them a melt, and you're essentially done. So it's a little bit more fiddly than a short splice, but we'll come back in a moment and show you the completely finished product. But as you can see, it's a much tinier diameter than the short splice. So if you need it to go over a block or a pulley, and you don't have a whole lot of room to play with, a long splice is probably the way to go. And I've actually used this in a non-sailing situation to temporarily repair an alternator and a water pump belt on my car. Got stranded. Did up one of these fairly quickly, and it got me to the next service station. So it actually does have practical applications. But we'll come back in a moment and show you the completely finished product. Okay, so this is the finished form of the long splice. You can see that, and I wasn't too careful about melting these things and just let them be a bit black. Actually, maybe it'll make it easier for you to see. But if you look at the length of it, that's the full length of a standard long splice compared to a short splice. And this short splice has actually been tapered. Probably just the standard short splice would be something in this range. So the long splice is probably at least twice as long. You can also see though that the long splice is an awful lot smaller diameter. It still does make it slightly thicker than the original rope. In this 3/8 inch rope, we did a quick measurement and found that at the thickest points, essentially where the tucks happen, we have an increase of approximately 2 millimeters in diameter. But it still should be close enough to the original to allow it to go through a block or a pulley. And it is quite strong. There's no way in the world I'm going to break this or make it unravel just by me pulling on it. It's about 2/3 of the strength of the original rope, which for 3/8 inch nylon is an awful lot stronger than I could break or come even close to doing just by pulling on it. So there's your long splice.